Hello there, this is Ken Rusk, and you're listening to Awaken Nation with Brad Salas.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Salas, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people just like you and me from all over who are doing amazing things to Awakened Nation.
Hey, everybody. I have Ken Rusk on the show, or should I say the Ken Rusk on the show, best-selling author, entrepreneur, blue-collar advocate, and we're going to do a deep dive into working hard, doing real jobs, doing life the way it used to be, I believe. Am I right, Ken?
Absolutely, you're 100% right. It's a whole different world than when I grew up, and I'm assuming when you grew up, and
Yeah.
we'll talk a lot about that today.
Get your pen and paper ready, my friends. If you got a young adult who doesn't want to work, this is probably the show for you. And if you have a young child and you want to think about what trajectory you want to send them on in life, this is also the show for you. So I'll read a little bit of your bio. Ken Rusk is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and blue-collar advocate that proves there is no degree needed to achieve comfort, peace, and freedom. Ken spent his younger years digging ditches and working in construction. He is passionate about helping people achieve their dreams, regardless of their educational background or past. In Ken's book, Blue Collar Cash, he shares his insights from over 30 years of working in blue collar trades as an entrepreneur, mentor, and life coach. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Ken Rusk.
Thanks for having me, Brad. I really appreciate it. Let's have a good time today.
You got it. Hey, where are you sitting right now? I see some cool stuff in the background.
I'm actually at my stand-up desk, which I bought about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and I love it. But I'm in Sylvania, Ohio, which is a little town on the western end of Lake Erie, just outside of Toledo, where I've been
Nice.
for the last 38 years.
So what you're saying is it's cold in the winter.
It is, yeah. I tend to try to escape a little bit, Brad, but yeah, it can be cold here.
Uh, awesome. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and so I'm quite used to cold, shoveling snow, things like that.
Oh
So
yeah.
let let's dig in and go back in time a little bit and start out your career. How did everything start out for you when it comes to hard work?
Well, if you get beyond, you just mentioned snow. So if you get beyond shoveling driveways for $3 back in the day, um, you know, we did paper routes and we did everything. We worked at a bakery, worked at a bowling alley. I mean, all those kinds of part-time things. When I was 15, though, is when I started getting serious. And I wanted my first, as full-time job as I could get. Because I mean, I wanted
Right.
my first used car, take out my girlfriend for pizza or go bowling with my buddies, whatever. So
Yeah.
my high school shared a fence with an industrial park, and that fence had a big hole in it that we used to walk through the industrial park to get to the carryout where we would hang out after school. And I just remember walking through these buildings, and there was all this energy going on, big boy Tonka toys, dump trucks
Yeah.
and backhoes and stuff. So one day I said, look I'm going to find out what these guys do here. I knew someone that had worked there for a little bit. And I said, tell me about this place. And they said, well, we're basically ditch diggers. We fix old, wet, smelly basements. And I said, well, look I'm wholly qualified to do that. So, um, yeah, I worked with them in the summertime digging ditches. And then in the wintertime, I would work in the office after school because it was so close. It was just convenient. And, it was cool, Brad, because I got to learn the front and the back of the house, as they say,
Yeah.
the sales side and also the revenue side. And they had me doing that for till I was 18-ish. And then it was like, do I go to school? What do I do? And they came to me and they said, look, you can go to college. We understand that. Fine. But we also want you to consider, since you know so much about this business, we want you to go open franchises for us around the Midwest. So I said, all right, well, that's probably as good as college for me. So
Right.
that's what I did. I literally opened up Chicago, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and from scratch. I mean, we're talking about empty buildings when we got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we did all of the infrastructure, we did all the office setup, and then hired the people, got the thing moving, and then moved on to the next one. And it was the best training you could ever have because I got to make mistakes with other people's money, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And so yeah, then real quick in '86, I got tired of living out of a suitcase, so we moved here to Toledo, Ohio, and opened up our own shop. Started with 6 people, and now we have, I think, 220 some people here. So it's been a hell of a ride.
Wow. I'm impressed. Uh, I'm also a baby boomer, and my first job was like real job was 1979, but I too wanted, to work. So I had a paper route at like 14, 15
Yeah,
years of age. And for those of you listening who may not know this, your parents had to sign, and I think they still do, they had to sign this yellow card that basically said they're allowing you to work. And because the child labor laws were like, no, you can't do that. Uh,
right,
so, you got that card, and I remember distinctly delivering newspapers. And my best friend, Dieter, he also was delivering papers on the other side of town. So sometimes I would cover for him. But we would work our butts off. I was going to say something else, but
sure.
we would work our butts off. And then I'd do collection. And at the end of that, I'd look and I'd have $10 a week I was making, basically. You remember those days? You're like, what
I, I've got a funny story. So the guy that the people weren't paying, and it was in the wintertime, and people were gone, and I couldn't collect, and they would send them collection notices, and for some reason they just weren't paying, which came out of my pocket, believe it or not.
right. Yeah.
So I finally told the guy, I said, hey, um, I can't do this anymore. Okay. I got to make money. I have to have something for my efforts riding my bike in the snow to deliver newspapers. So um
Lucky you
yeah,
rode your bike. I walked.
yeah. So I quit, and I remember him saying, this is one of the only times my mother ever whacked me good for disrespecting someone, but he was in my kitchen and he said, quitting like this, you're never going to amount to anything. And I said right back to him, what are you talking about? You're 40 years old and you're still delivering newspapers. so,
Oh, 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 oh,
so yeah, I got a quick swipe from my mom on that one because I
yeah.
shouldn't have disrespected him because he had a job to do like anybody else. But that was a hard gig for the little amount of money that you made. That's for sure.
It really was. I also, from that generation of we got smacked if we mouthed off.
Oh yeah,
My dad was Hungarian and he was tough as nails. And I remember mouthing off to my mom at 19 at the dinner table. My dad walked around the corner and said, "Stand up." He gave me a left hook right
yeah,
across the temple, knocked me on my, what. And he said, and this was the distinction. This was the big distinction. He said, "Don't you ever talk to my wife like that again." He didn't say mom. He said,
yeah.
"My wife." And I
Right.
was like, oh, okay. There's a boundary here. And it
Yeah.
wasn't bad. He just had to prove a lesson. He had to tell me what it is. Did your parents have a big influence on your work ethic at all?
Well, my dad was a Marine. He was a pretty tough guy. I called him the imperfect perfectionist because he demanded perfection. And
Yeah.
some of the ways that he got that perfection was not perfect,
Yeah.
as you just alluded to.
Yeah.
So he had 5 boys under the age of 9 living in a very small house.
Woo.
So he ran it like a barracks, and that was fun most of the time,
Yeah.
until you didn't make your bed. But yeah, he taught me if you're going to do something, if you're going to spend time doing it, whether it's scrubbing white walls or shining shoes or whatever you're going to do, I'm waxing a car, whatever, get the right stuff, get the right tools, do it right, make it perfect, and then
Right.
stand back and look at it and go, wow, okay, I did that. And so there was this stand back moment that I later coined the phrase stand back moment, where you get to look back at what you've done. And so he was a definite influence. My mother was the nurturer. She put us back
Yeah.
together every time Dad broke Humpty Dumpty. She put us back together.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I really wouldn't change a thing.
That's awesome. My dad wasn't in the military, but I had to bounce a quarter off my bed kind of
Oh
thing
yeah,
after I made it. So I learned, maybe you did this, but I learned not to mess up the sheets. Like I would lay in bed, and if I had to turn and it's cold in my bedroom in the winter because
hmm
I was on the third floor, I would push the sheets up, flip really fast, and let it come back down. And then in the morning when I got out, I only had like a quarter of the bed to make. I didn't
yeah.
have much to do. And Yeah.
You get smart that way.
Well, you have to, you know. Do you polish your shoes with a toothbrush, by the way? 'Cause
You know what? I use the toothbrush to get the wax out of the fenders and the door jams and all that. I can tell you that much
yeah,
when I waxed the car. But yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, and again, you know, that's part of this whole thing that I've been doing with the book and in the course and the speaking and everything that I'm doing is just trying to get people to understand that there is an organic way of growing up that's necessary and it's important and it's
yes,
effective. And it's not always, it's not always Minecraft on your iPad. It's tough and
yeah,
it should be. But that's how you kind of forge who you become and who you are as a human being. And
yeah,
again, I wouldn't change even the bad times. I wouldn't change any of them because
sure.
everything was a learning opportunity there. So
I want to get into this a little bit because we have clearly had a shift in dynamics and parenting over the last 50 years. And uh, my father's advice really, the way he raised me, and I'm sure the way your father raised you, in the back of their head was this message. My dad told me this to my face actually when I was like 11. He goes, "I may be hard on you, but I want you to understand I am preparing you for the day I die." I said, "I am preparing you uh, to be able to take care of yourself, to cook a dinner, to, build a house, whatever you have to do. I'm preparing you for my death." And he said that. He wasn't mincing words. And I feel over the last 40, 50 years, and let's talk about this. What do you think went wrong? I mean, everything has shifted, and we listen to all these experts in the field like Carl Rogers and Dr. Spock and all this. What do you think went wrong through the years?
well, first off, I think technology is a really good thing until it's not.
Right.
Okay. When you replace, and I just mentioned it, I don't have a thing against video games, but when you replace going out in the backyard and building an actual tree fort with lumber and hammer and nails and a crude design, when you replace that with trying to erect a city on a screen in your hands in your living
Yeah.
room, that's just not the same experience. And so a lot of that, I mean, I was just on Fox News the other day talking about the gentleman from Cheers, Cliff, the mailman, saying we don't teach our kids to use tools anymore. And he's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And I only say that because it's important that we get back to creating these organic youth for our kids, this organic way of growing up where people actually are self-sustaining. I mean, you take a look at any animal, okay? Any animal, from a robin who kicks the baby out of the nest and he's on his own from that point,
Yeah.
okay, to a lion, a tiger, any animal, nobody coddles their children forever. I mean, they teach them how to go out and fight and chase and eat and kill and whatever, hunt, whatever it is. We have to do those things. We have to prepare our kids so that when they're 16, 17, 18, 19, they can start to solve real world problems for themselves so that they have the confidence. I mean, you're not going to believe this. I was at a party the other day, and one of the moms said to me, "My son just called me. He didn't know how to put gas in the car, and he was driving it."
What?
Yeah, that's a true story. So I thought to myself, okay, we have gone way off the charts
Yeah.
with this ease of doing everything for our kids, and I get it. I mean, and this goes to college and everything else. I mean, I wrote an open letter to parents on my website at kenrusk.com, and I said, listen, I get it. I'm a parent. I know that you birthed your child and you clothed your child, diapered them, you've sheltered them and you fed them and you kept them
Yeah.
safe and you taught them what you could. And now, for some reason, you think that you have to coddle them through a 4-year college degree because if not, you failed as a parent. That
Right.
has simply never been true in the history of our world. Okay. And it's even more not true now. And it will continue to be less true as we move forward with the way this supply and demand curve is going for blue collar trade workers. So
Right.
we really have to be careful. And I get it because long answer here, but I get it. The parents are getting hoodwinked by teachers and guidance counselors and principals and their neighbors and friends and keeping up with the Joneses and colleges themselves that this is the only way to raise your kid. That is an absolute untruth. I'll call it, I'll be nice. It's an untruth. And the only people that win are the colleges in that scenario. So,
George Orwell said this in 1984, the book 1984. There are some ideas so absurd that only an intellectual could believe them. And I thoroughly believe that we exchanged feel good, self esteem nonsense uh, against the backdrop of traditional parenting, which was, I'm going to be a little rough on you. I love you to death, but I have to prepare you for life, man. And life is going to beat you up. And we have 35-year-olds who are crying over stuff I dealt with when I was 10 years old. And it frustrates me to no end. The thing that bugs me the most, Ken, is when you present a logical argument about how to raise a child or raise your own kids, there's so much pushback that you're somehow wrong. When we all knew back in the day, if I did something bad on the playground, another adult could grab me by the back of the collar, drag me to my house, and tell my father what I had done, and my father would whoop my what.
sure.
And now we have a whole bunch of people who are claiming that somehow that is wrong. You can't do that. But how is society supposed to function if we don't have a very solid line of what is right and wrong and what you should be doing and what you should not be doing?
Well, there's no doubt, and it doesn't have to be religion, although I grew up thinking, okay, someone, how they say Santa Claus around Christmas, Santa Claus is watching you, you're not going to get
Yeah.
your, well, I grew up thinking all year long that there was some being, some God up there who was looking down on me, and he knew if I did something wrong, I was going to pay for it.
Yeah,
And
he has a set of closed CCTVs, and he's
right.
watching everything you do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do believe there's some of that's missing that could come back. There's no doubt the traditions of those things. Even if you don't believe every detail of every religion, there was still this discipline that you had.
Yeah.
You got up, you got dressed, you went to a respectful place, you saw other families there, you listened to a great message, and then you maybe shared some fried chicken or whatever, and then you went home.
Yeah.
But there is some discipline to all that. Again, I come back to the word organic, and I don't know why, but that type of growing up, and I think we really need to get back to those kinds of things, because the opposite is a race to the bottom. And that is, okay, I'm gonna open up my phone and I'm gonna compare myself to every other human being at their best possible scenario. Oh, by the way, with filters and makeup and more filters and all those things that make you feel nothing but inferior, when you are a beautiful human being. No matter who you are, there's a great purpose for you in life. No matter who you are, you just have to find it, own it, and forget what everybody else is telling you and look past all the noise.
I maybe this is a little deep to go into right now, but I believe this has been planned. I believe the nuclear family has been destroyed. Separation began in the 50s, right after World War II. The word teenager really wasn't in our vernacular. That was invented by marketing gurus. Because in the 50s, suddenly, we came back from World War II and they were having kids, and, there were jobs, there was plenty of prosperity. So you had youth were now getting a job, and they were moving into suburbs and cities. And now a young person would save money to buy a car. That didn't happen before that. You usually stayed on the farm. You were with your parents, and you had the same religious beliefs, you had the same political beliefs, and you listened to the radio, late at night. And then suddenly everything started to change to separate us from a core value. Because honestly, Ken, and you probably can agree with this or not. You can tell me no, Brad, that's not true. I think it was to shift voting allegiance, because a lot of us voted along the same lines as our parents. We listened to similar music. My dad made me listen to Pat Boone during the 70s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When my dad was driving, he controlled the radio, and that was it.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that a little bit?
Well, I look at it this way. Somebody figured out, and we don't have to go into parties or whatever, but you'll know what I'm saying. Somebody figured out that if I promise you free stuff and I keep you dependent on me, you're going to vote for me forever.
Right.
Now,
Right.
how do I get you hooked on that? Well, I destroy tradition. I destroy the modern American family. I create situations where it's okay not to have a dad or a mom in the house
Yeah.
because all of those things create a need for something greater, a need for a dependency of some sort. And I mean, you answered the question right there. Whoever can get people, it's almost like take heroin and make it a social program. Okay. If I can get people hooked on heroin, then the drug dealer lives forever. Right.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
I totally believe that um, when you can't win an argument on facts, then you yell squirrel and you say, "Would you like a free piece of candy?" And then that's it. And that's what's happening.
We've gotten rid of common sense and logic. That's really what has happened. So now when someone hears Jordan Peterson speak, they've never heard conservative values and they're like, wow. But I want to go back to like when I was in the 70s, and you basically, when you went to high school, you had 4 or 5 routes you could take.
Sure.
So one, you could choose business, which meant you got typing classes and maybe you got a little taste of computer technology. But then you had academic. So I wanted to go to college, so I got the academic route. But I went to a school that was hands-on that would teach me how to be a graphic designer,
Sure.
like a trade school almost instead of a college. So I was on the academic course. Then we had Votech. My best friend was he wanted to learn about computers and technology, and it was so new at that time. He went over to Votech, which was half a day at another place. And when you took Votech, you could learn auto mechanics, you could learn plumbing, and he happened to learn electronics, how to build a motherboard, how to do different things, how electronic components worked. And then the fourth track you could take, I grew up in a farming community in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And so you could be a part of the 4-H club and you could,
Exactly.
go out to a farm, learn how to raise cattle and feed the animals, husbandry, cattle husbandry. Or you could learn how to grow corn. So you had these in the past, but then I started to notice I graduated in like 81. So right around the 80s, my guidance counselors were pushing like crazy for college. And I think that was a big mistake. Let's talk about that a little bit because I think not everybody's built for college and they wound up going to college.
Well, our paths were pretty similar because ours were 4-H. We had that scenario, but we also had shop class in our high school.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate that we could walk down the hallway and see somebody changing the transmission on a Mustang. If you looked right, you could
Nice.
see someone milling a table leg for a kitchen table. You could see someone wiring an outlet or building a little barn or whatever. So we had that stuff. And then they took those rooms and converted them to all computer rooms and took out all the machines. And I always thought, well, why was it such a binary choice? Why couldn't we have had both? Why
Yeah.
did it have to be one for the other? So what happens is you eliminated the almost accidental discovery of how cool the trades are for millions of kids
Yeah.
because they would see it and they would go, wow, what's going on in there? I think I'd like to learn that. And then all of a sudden they became carpenters and now they're building houses and they're successful. So you eliminated that possibility. Well, then, as I said before, we got rid of playing around in the backyard with lumber and building tree forts or fixing or repairing or whatever, anything, and working on our bicycles, whatever. And now we're working on these little silly screens all day long. And colleges, they're the fourth one. They were the shame factors, where if you didn't put your kid through college, then they were never going to amount to anything. Well, that's never been true. So it's almost like a perfect storm. There was like this trifecta that it was working against a a normalized raising of a child to where they could make these decisions. But
Right.
I do still think this. I do still think we have to get parents to understand that there's 167 million people working in the United States considered full employment. Half of those people, and I looked this up painstakingly through the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 77 million of those people still to this day do something with their hands. So
Wow.
now what are we doing? We're way overproducing business degrees or liberal arts degrees or degrees that you can't even use, and we're way
Oh,
underproducing tradespeople. Well, simple supply and demand tells you that where supply is low and demand is high, that's where the money goes. So parents have to get over this thing that if their kid doesn't have a college degree, they've failed them somehow. What they have to do is they have to say to themselves, my goal should be to raise a smart, independent, problem-solving, financially savvy, hardworking individual. And then
yeah.
whatever they land on, they're going to be good on their own, doing what they need to do. Nobody, Brad, ever walked up into my driveway and saw that what I've created, which is pretty cool. And the car, and I have a lot of cool things, but no one's ever walked up into my driveway and said, hey, man, what degree do you have?
Yeah.
They may have said, how did you grind this life out? And I'm happy to tell them that. But
Yeah.
it's never a one or the other. And what's even worse is some of these statistics in Blue Collar Cash. I write about this. If a school is taking in 40% of its kids, not knowing why they're going there, that's a pretty wasteful scenario. And then
It is.
of the 40%, 25% of those change their mind on their degree and add another year to it. So there's another wasteful problem. But only 33% of the people that get a full on degree ever use it ever. Now, if that was any other company, you'd be out of business for being that ineffective.
Yes.
But yet, not only is that their report card, but they also have billions of dollars in their endowment funds sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is really challenging. And I'll finish with this. I'm not anti-college. If you're going to operate on my shoulder so I can get back on the golf course, I want you to know everything there is to know about a knife before you come at me with it.
Right.
However, if you're just going to college to play beer pong and wonder what's going to happen in 4 years, there's a much better way to live. That's for sure.
It's so true. I feel incredibly blessed because when I was a kid, I had so many things that I was active in. So I have a talent with art. I have a talent with my voice, and I have a talent with playing drums. So I made a decision at 17 because I would play drums for a small band at like a country club or a wedding, and I would make $80 a night in 1979. That's a lot of money.
A lot
Okay,
of money.
plus tips. So I didn't have to work at a fast food restaurant. But I did get a job in the summer at Hershey Park. So I was a barker. And I remember this distinctly. I came home one night. I had plans with my friends. The was going down. I had worked a full like 8, 10 hour shift. I was tired and I still had my uniform on. And I walked, pulled up into the driveway and there's all these lights in the backyard. And I'm thinking, oh boy, my dad has got a project going on. And he comes up the driveway. He says, hey, I need you to put on your work clothes. I need you to help, digging a ditch. And he was dead serious. I said, but I have plans with my friends. You know how 17-year-olds are.
Yeah.
I want to go to Tashi Station. And
Yeah.
my dad said, well, you're going to call them and cancel and get your ass out back. And that's how parenting was back then. And we
Sure.
we had to do it because in the winter our line from the pump house would freeze. So my
Sure.
dad had to lower the line another 2 feet. So a lot of people, I explain this, they don't understand what I'm talking about. But
Right.
and I want to shift gears a little bit because your book, it's extraordinary. I've had a chance to look at a little bit of it, but what inspired you to write the book, and what's your favorite story inside the book?
Um, what inspired me was I never set out to be an author, but I can tell you that I was practicing being a involuntary life coach because when you have 200 and some people, you've hired 2,000 over the last 30 years to get them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I've been in a lot of interviews and I saw that kids were less and less and less prepared to go into the workforce or even less prepared to think about life. And then something terrible happened. My daughter came down with cancer when she was 12, and I sat in, when you're in oncology rooms and waiting rooms and doctor's offices and, you know, ultrasound rooms and all that kind of stuff, you have a lot of time to think. So,
Yeah.
um, I wrote a long letter to her about what I thought she should be chasing. Like if, when she gets through this, which she did, she's through it. In fact, she just had our first granddaughter, and we're just over the
Oh,
moon.
God bless.
Yeah. Um, but I wrote a long letter to her, which ended up telling stories of friends of mine who were ended up being blue collar entrepreneurs, but they overcame these enormous challenges in order to be successful. And I mean, like the worst of the worst that you can imagine.
Right.
Um, Crime and murder and drug addiction and crazy. So as I was writing these stories, my wife said to me, I think you have a book here. And I said, well, I've never written a book, but I have like 12 legal pads full of notes at this point, handwritten, by the way. So um, we started putting it together, and I literally just shopped editors in New York on Google, and I hooked up with a guy named Kevin Anderson who has 40 or 50 ghostwriting slash editors in his stable, if you will. And I met with a couple of those, and we decided to make a project out of it. And it became a bestseller last fall, which I'm shocked, totally grateful and thankful for that. But yeah, I mean the real impetus was if what I'm doing to create an entrepreneurial spirit around this office works so well, which it does, then why am I not sharing that with people beyond these four walls? So that's kind of the gist of the thing.
I think, that is the very best reason to write a book is that and a lot of people, if you're listening right now, you may not think of what you are doing as extraordinary, but Ken here is talking about how he life coached employees through the years. And I feel like, that mentorship just was a great platform to get the book out. And this is a great service at this time because a lot of young people don't know how to adult, as they say. I don't know how to adult. The skills that you and I, just because it's a generational thing,
Sure.
had to do, they have had all that removed. So you have, and I'm not saying in all cases, millennials, they're divided into different camps. There's the ones who've given up and they're playing video games or whatever. Then there's the ones who are designing video games and crushing it. And then you have the ones who are raised very similar to us and they're starting businesses or they're the top salesperson at their insurance agency. So you can't put them all into one box. But this idea of how to live, I think, has been removed, and you're bringing that to the forefront, which is what I love. You don't have to go to college. You're not knocking college, but hey, look at the blue collar sectors. There's guys making great money doing what they do.
Well, it's amazing because when I think of an entrepreneur, okay, and here's another one of those words, okay. Oh, I've heard this before, Brad. Oh, you're lucky. You're one of those entrepreneur guys. Okay, here's a piece of paper and a crayon. Draw entrepreneur for me, okay? You,
Yeah.
you can't because it's a vague concept. But an entrepreneur is someone that has, I believe, 8 or 9 characteristics like persistence, resilience, faith, courage, vision, sympathy, generosity, all those kinds of things. Now, I firmly believe that every one of us has those characteristics inside of us. All it takes is for a reason why for those to come out. And what I
Right.
mean by that is, we have brochures for everything in our life: cars, vacations, houses, backyard furniture, whatever. Why don't we have a brochure that is to be our expected life, the life that we see for ourselves, that only we can come up with? So I'm real hip on having people build brochures, whether they draw with crayons or like they did when they were kids, or whether they cut out pictures or whatever, because if I can start with what I want my life to look like, then I can take almost any path to get there.
Yep.
And that's why I say sometimes, and this is controversial, but sometimes I think it's not so important what we do for a living as it is what we do with what we do for a living.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you're progressing or if you're gaining on that picture that is to be your life, that puzzle that you have out there in front of you, which we all know through reticular activating systems and the law of attraction and everything else, that what you see, you tend to attract yourself
Right.
to and receive, then why aren't we using that gift of vision, which is in our brains already? It's free, it requires no training. You just sit down and wonder what could be, draw that out, and then allow your body almost automatically to attract itself to that. That's the thing that I think is really missing, because the people you just described, the gamer, the game builder, or the business starter, they all have the ability to dream, to wish, and to hope. It's the very few that write it down and draw it out and say, now where's the path to getting there? Those are the ones that we really need to be looking after and saying, that's the example. That's the tutorial right there. Because only 1% of the people are willing to go that far, but yet those are the people that make 9 times more money than anybody else. So
Wait a minute. We're getting law of attraction advice from the blue collar guy. This is amazing. I love this. Uh, yeah, I think it's something that God gifts us with, and that is this imagination. We have a creative imagination, but the part we all miss is taking action to actually manifest it, to bring it into reality. That is a God-given gift. That's the law of creation. We have that divine gift. And I don't think enough young people are taught that. They get caught up in, well, what I see, I should get depressed over. No, you want to create a life that leaps over the problems you have right now. Do you have the discipline, the gumption? Gumption means resilience and drive, by the way. For those who don't, I'm using an old word.
yeah,
Um,
right.
but I had metal shop and wood shop in junior high, and they replaced that, much like you had talked about earlier. They now put the boys in home ec with the girls, which I thought, so for half a semester we're doing wood and metal shop, and then the rest of the year we're in home ec. And I saw that shift dramatically take place. So, what do you think we can do to shift everything back a little bit? Because college should be a choice just as much as being a farmer should be a choice, or working with your hands. What do we need to do to get back to that?
Well, I look at it this way. If it's true that half the people in the country end up working with their hands and the other half of the country works in some type of blue or white collar scenario, then your expectation, if you have 4 kids, your expectation might be that 2 of them learn tactily. They learn with their hands, or they learn by doing, or they learn by
Yeah,
building or fixing or breaking. So all I can say is, if you let the law of supply and demand work for you, you will understand that you're not supposed to raise a college educated kid. You're supposed to raise a happy, self-sufficient kid, no matter how they get there, right?
right.
And I look at it as, okay, let's assume that you force one of those kids who shouldn't be in college into college. So here's what happens. All in, car, gas, food, travel, room and board, everything. You might spend 40, 50,000 a year on that. Okay.
Right.
Multiply that by 4, that's $200,000 on the negative side of your asset base. Hopefully you didn't borrow that money, right?
Right.
Now, take that same kid who really was meant to be a carpenter, put him out into the field with a carpenter as an assistant. He's going to make 50, 60, 70,000 a
Yeah.
year for his first 4 years. Now you're talking about conservatively a $200,000 plus side on his or her asset base. That is a $400,000 swing
Yep.
by the time they're 23 years old. Okay. So all I'm saying is, parents, stop the madness. Just think about that for a second. Is it your goal to walk around this earth and say, I've got 4 college educated kids? Or is it your goal to say, I've got 4 happy, independent,
Yeah.
kids that can do for themselves? I think it's the latter. And I don't think you should feel bad for 1 second if your child ends up owning 7 auto mechanic shops and he's making $1 million a year. You know what I'm saying? Why would you feel bad
It
that he
sucks
that
to be
he
you. Yeah.
yeah. Why would you feel bad that they've created this amazing success by getting grease under their fingers? I mean,
Yeah.
who cares? As long as they're happy and they can
Yeah.
do the great things they want for themselves in this life.
If I hadn't gone to college, I think about what my trajectory would be, and I would have to wind up in something creative. And I always thought I would have gravitated towards uh, detailing motorcycles, with the flames and everything, because
Sure.
I'm really good with painting and drawing. And back in our day, it was vans. You wanted to do the side
Oh
of a
yeah.
van with a unicorn and a
Sure.
busty
The
girl.
eagle, the big
Yeah,
eagle.
yeah,
Yeah.
big giant eagle, one of those or something. But um, I think parents where they screwed up through the years with listening to experts is this projection that, and you touched on this, that the parent would somehow be a failure if they didn't micromanage and worry about their child constantly.
Right.
And you and I are from that generation where your parents were like, get the hell out of the house. And
Yeah.
you left for the whole day. You
Sure.
rode by. We didn't have play dates. I never heard of such a thing.
No,
Play
no,
dates.
no, no.
I went over to Dieter's house, knocked on the door. If he wasn't there, I went to Frank's house, another block away.
Yeah.
And my parents had to know the parents of anybody I was hanging out with and the phone numbers. That was
Right.
number one. And so
But that
my
was all
dad,
of it. I mean, there
yeah,
wasn't much more than that. Yeah.
right. And my dad had gone to high school with Frank's parents. So they all knew each other and were
Sure.
happy that, we were family and family friends. So my parents always knew where I was. And you had to be back in when the street lights came on. So we always found that one street light that didn't go on for a long time.
Yeah. Right.
It was like a half an hour later it would pop on. And yeah, so it's a very different era. So what
Well,
is your
I've
favorite?
got, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to give you an example, but go ahead.
No, what's your favorite story from the book? Because every author, when you're writing, my first book, I had to have stories from my childhood in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, that would connect the dots to some business acumen or lesson that I learned later in life. Every author has that one story that you either loved writing in the book, or someone comes up to you after reading the book and says, that story about, so and so, that made my day. I got it then. So please share
Well,
with us.
I would say the most potent story was the story of my daughter and me learning how she got cancer and how to take her through that. I mean, that was not one that I would wish on anyone, but it was again, it was a very potent, powerful story. Um, but I think the other one was this. So I wrote a story about the grass cutter from Minnesota, and the reason I call him that is because I still don't know what his name is, but I was in a Club Med celebrating with about 10 or 15 of my people, my coworkers. This is 25 years ago. And I'll never forget, I saw this guy sitting at the bar. And when you go to a Club Med, you pay for your drinks with beads. You buy these
Right.
beads and you wear them like necklaces. So I remember going to the bar every night before dinner and we would do shots of tequila or whatever just to celebrate. And this guy was he was there every night. And the bartenders knew him like they were his brother. Okay. So really bleach blonde, white hair, super dark tan. And when you go to Club Med, you get a wristband with a color on it. And that color means you're here from Wednesday to Wednesday or Saturday to Saturday. And people know when you're coming and they know when you're going. So I looked at his wrist and he had 7 or 8 bands on his wrist. So finally I said to him, I said, dude, what's with the wrists? What's with the wristbands? And he said, well, people live their lives in different ways. And I choose to live my life this way. So from April through November, I bust my butt with my little landscaping company. I got a couple of buddies. I have a perfect little ranch house in Minnesota, little barn in the back, a couple lawnmowers and some pickup trucks, and they're all great. They're all in good shape. They're all relatively new. But we bust our butts sun up to sundown for those 9 months because then on the 10th month in one day, we come down to Club Med for 3 straight months. And we hang out and we go from club to club and we just hang out and do nothing. And we escape from the world for 90 days every year in the spring. And this guy was only 25 years old.
Wow.
So the impact it had on me was, if you saw this guy in a restaurant, you and your Ivy League friends might look down on this guy. Not you particularly, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So you might look down on this guy, but he's got the world by the you know what's. and
Yeah.
maybe you don't. Okay. So, um, it really got, I mean, it had an impact so much so that I wrote about him 25 years later. But it was interesting because everyone has the way that they want to live their life, their own perfect nirvana. Okay,
Yeah.
man, if I could live like that, that would be cool. We're not all going to chase 15 cars and mega yachts and mansions and planes and all that rap star careers. So he was perfectly happy living in that amazing scenario, 9 and 3, 9 months and 3 months. And I thought, well, my God, look at the power that he's got to be able to do that and look back at the rest of the world and say, maybe I got it right and you got it wrong. So pretty cool story.
Boom. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that quote John Lennon did, and that was the teacher asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "Happy." She says, "I don't think you understand the assignment." And he said, "I don't think you understand life."
Yeah. Right.
Ken Rusk, how do we get a hold of you, my friend?
Well, if you go to kenrusk.com, you'll see the course there in the book. I wrote a course because it's 8 simple sessions. They're half an hour per session, but it really forces you to take what you learned from the book and change your life today, not tomorrow, but today. And I was tired of people reading books and going, "Man, great book," and then they never did anything with it. They never
Yeah.
changed their life with it at all. So I have that there. I donate most of that money to charity anyway, so it's my way of giving back to someone who wants to cut their learning curve a little bit coming up behind me. And then I'm also on Ken Rusk Official on all the social media channels. I have people that help me do that because I'm
Yeah.
old and I don't understand that stuff. Um, but yeah, it's a pretty good place to go hang out and see what I'm up to
Yeah.
there.
My girl's a little younger than me, so she takes care of the that stuff. So
There you go.
Gen X. Thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation. Yeah, it's been an honor to have you on.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And from this side of the screen, it was nice having a genuine conversation with you, especially as we lean into how people really need to get back to their roots and grow up organically and get rid of all these electronics and just kind of
Uh,
figure it out the way we used to do it.
yep, ain't it the truth? So I'm not going to let you go so easily. I have three questions in our lightning
Okay.
round, and I'm going to ask those questions of you. I actually wrote them down while I was listening to you.
Nice.
Um, my first question is, do you have a favorite memory?
Oh my God. It would have to be after several tries of being unsuccessful, seeing my daughter being born.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it was a C-section and I got to watch the whole thing because my friend was the doctor and it was just off the charts. And now seeing my granddaughter, it just brings all that back to parenthood is one of the best things in the world.
And on that note, my next question is, what advice would you give to young parents now just starting out?
This is a good one because you have to remember mathematically you have 6 sections of 7 years to save money between 21 years of age and 63 years of age. If you choose to blow off that first 7 year period, okay, you miss out on the final double of what your money can do later on in life. Meaning, if you save at 21 years of age and continue that process, you get to take advantage of that last number going from 600,000 to 1,000,000 too.
Right.
If you blow that first section of 7 years, if you blow that off, you cut out half of your double. I mean, you cut out half of your fortune.
Wow.
So if someone offers to pay your son or daughter 40,000 a year, I want you to say, thank you for paying him $37,000 a year and bury that $3,000 in a 401k where he or she can't see it, can't take it, can't touch it, can't smell it, can't feel it, can't spend it. You will have a millionaire by the time they're 21 years of age on track to become that and have someone who will never rely on the government for anything and to be independent that way.
God bless you, man. That's a great answer. And I wish people taught that more and more these days. Yeah. My last question, by the way, is your dad and mom still alive?
My mother is still alive. My father passed away at Christmas time. So yeah,
Oh, God
that was
bless.
tough because he was a amazing man. But he had 85 really good years on this planet, and he wasn't really sick at all. So I mean, it was just one of those things. So
I hear you. So my last question is there anything you wanted to say one last time to your father?
um, it's so funny because every time the song "Wish You Were Here" comes on with Pink Floyd, and I'm sure you know who that is,
Yes.
it kind of wrecks me for a few minutes. So I wish that it happened so fast. He just fell asleep. So I wish I could have just said, "Hey, dude, you were the best dad in the world," and I miss you, and I wish I would have got a chance to say goodbye. But um, I'm glad he went the way he did because no one wants to spend 6 months or a year in bed suffering. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I look up and say goodbye to him all the time, and whenever that song comes on, I feel like he's talking to me. So
God bless, Ken. Thank you for being on Awakened Nation. Great way
yes,
to end the show, my friend. Thank you.
same to you, Brad. And that was a great question. Thank you for asking it.
You're welcome. Yeah, my dad died in 2012, and I think the hardest thing I had to do is after he died, everybody left the hospital room. I had to remove his wedding band and his watch and things,
Yeah,
and put him in a box.
yeah,
And yeah, I wouldn't be the man I am today if it wasn't for my dad. So
no question.
absolutely. So uh, once again, how do we get a hold of you? Go to kenrusk.com, correct?
KenRusk.com or at Ken Rusk Official. You can see what I'm up to in all those places.
And pick up the book, Blue Collar Cash. Excellent read. I love how you delve into entrepreneurship as well in the beginning. Just a fun read, and you have guidance along the way connected to those videos and those, worksheets that you can do.
Yep.
And I think that's how most books should be written today. Make them interactive. So, thank you, my friend.
I appreciate it. Come back anytime.
You bet. Hey, everybody, don't forget to tune in next week for another extraordinary guest here on Awakened Nation. Until then, bye bye for now. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share this episode out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success is because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.